Okay, hello everyone, welcome back. So now we are in our second session of the symposium, which is entitled Urgency, Institute and Activism. Which will be chaired by Judi Diab. And we have a list of 5 speakers speaking in this symposium, in this session. So I would like you to also welcome them. And now I will make way for Judi to go ahead and introduce the session.
Hi, everyone. My name is Judi. I'm a graduate from the AA and also a member of Impact Lebanon, working with Sibyl, who presented earlier. So following the explosion at the port on August 4th, Lebanon's civil society quickly redirected their energy overnight from the protests and mobilizations on the streets to the efforts to support the recovery of the devastated neighborhoods. The energy of thousands of youth who flocked to downtown armed with only shovels and brooms and mostly without direction initially fueled hope in a city at the time where everything had stood still. A critical factor for the successful interventions of civil society groups and NGOs is the synergy that's been set up between them and public agencies, some founded after the blast and others existing for years before that, and acting largely unnoticed but very effectively. So today we're going to have a few members from these NGOs and leaders discussing their work with us, and in some ways their cooperation. And we'd like to start first by looking into how we've recorded the impact of the blast on some of the spaces. So actors that were immediately trying to create records so we wouldn't lose consciousness of what exactly happened to our built environment after the blast. We're going to be starting with Alex Cochrane, who's going to take us on a photographic record of the destruction of Le Palais Sursock. So for those who don't know, among the many homes and buildings damaged in the explosion was the Sursock Palace and Museum, which is a 19th century palace and one of Beirut's grandest townhouses. So I'm going to leave it to Alex now to take us on a journey through Sursock.
Thanks, Judi. Thanks, Judi. I'm just going to run a slideshow of photographs that I took of the Palais Sursock in Beirut following the 4th of August explosion. I must point out now that this particular presentation doesn't focus on a solution of recovery as many others will do, but it's simply a record of destruction of an iconic and historic Lebanese building that many might be familiar with. As it runs, I'll speak over it. Briefly, my name is Alex Cochrane. I'm a Lebanese-Irish national living and working in London. I'm an architect and designer, and I run my own practice in London. I'm 47 years old, and I attended the AA between 1995 and 2000. I grew up in Beirut as a child, but left with my family for London following the Israeli invasion of 81. In 93, I returned to Beirut for a Lebanese experience. I stayed with my grandmother, Lady Yvonne Sursock Cochrane, at the Palais Sursock. The Palais Sursock is the subject of the presentation. I worked for the architect Pierre Khoury, and it was a time filled with hope and positive discourse. I returned to London to complete my architectural studies at the AA. My time in the Lebanon had a profound influence on my diploma years and was the focus of my 4th and 5th year thesis, which was called, somewhat ironically, Beirut, the Final Battle. Last August, a couple of days after the explosion, I traveled back to Beirut with my sister and parents, who luckily happened to be in the UK at the time, to offer support. We were not sure what to expect, but we knew that close family were hospitalized and our properties were badly damaged, some beyond repair. The presentation I'm sharing with you focuses only on the Palais Sursock. It includes photographs from my book, Le Palais Sursock, a photographic record of destruction. The book is published by Blurb and is available through the Blurb website. The photos were taken on the 9th and 10th of August, just prior to an ambitious clear-out, spearheaded by numerous NGOs and charities. I felt it was important to record and preserve this momentous but tragic event for future referencing. Following shoot, over 100 volunteers took part in the clear-out. The Sursock Palace is positioned on top of a hill in the Sursock quartier of Ashrafiyya. It has direct and undisrupted views of the port below, the ground zero site of the explosion. The house is less than 850 meters away. For that reason, it suffered significant damage. The palace was built in 1860. It is home to beautiful works of art, Ottoman-era furniture, marble sculptures, wood carvings, and paintings from Italy, all collected by 3 long-lasting generations of the Sursock family. It has been admired and written about by many, including those who visit the nearby Sursock Museum, also badly damaged by the explosion. This 160-year-old Beirut landmark is listed as a cultural heritage site and withstood 2 world wars, the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the French Mandate, and Lebanese independence. After the country's 1975 to 1990 civil war, it took 20 years of careful restoration for the family to bring the palace back to its former glory. Last August, in a split second, everything was destroyed again, much more so than during the 15 years of war. The explosion resulted in significant structural damage. Roofs collapsed, windows and shutters were shattered, thick masonry cracked, plaster from ornate ceilings formed mounds of debris on the floor below. Bronze metal work lay twisted and contorted. Glass was absolutely everywhere, but not on the windows as you would expect. Antique furniture collected over generations was splintered, statues decapitated, and canvases slashed by flying glass and plaster. Objects, heirlooms, books, personal notes, and letters lay strewn amongst the debris. This photographic journal records the unfortunate destruction of one of Lebanon's most revered and iconic structures. It was a disaster that many believe could have been avoided by Lebanon's dysfunctional and corrupt political elite. It was with great sadness that my grandmother, Lady Yvonne Sursock Cochrane, often referred to as a Jeanne d'Arc of Lebanon's cultural heritage, was hurled from the palace terrace as she took tea with friends. She was taken to hospital in the mountains but lost her battle to recover. She died on the 31st of August from injuries aged 98. Her son, my uncle, Roderick Cochrane, his wife, Mary, and their daughter, Ariana, continued to spearhead a colossal effort to secure and restore the palace to its former splendor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was great to see. We're going to move on to a presentation on the subject of NUSANED. So NUSANED is a humanitarian community-based and volunteer organization, and their 3 main programs were created to support the mission to provide shelter, food security, and economic opportunity to underprivileged Lebanese communities. It's one of the many NGOs that will be presenting with us today, and one of the longer-lived NGOs in Lebanon. So thank you, and I'm going to leave it to them.
Hi all, I'm Rana Samara. First of all, thank you for having us here and for allowing NUSANED to share our experience. I'm a practicing architect in Beirut, and I'm also a professor in practice in architecture at AUB. Today I'm representing NUSANED. I'm actually a board member, and I've been leading the shelter program since the establishment of NUSANED almost a year ago. So as Judi mentioned, we're a humanitarian, community-based, and non-religious, and non-political NGO in Lebanon, which was created like many initiatives at NGO post the October 2019 Thawra, and we were officially registered in May 2020. So we're actually a very young NGO, and given the short period and the many challenges facing Lebanon, we've established a very strong standing among local NGOs. Our vision is to empower the marginalized Lebanese communities throughout Lebanon to live sustainably. So our mission is to support these underserved Lebanese communities in the basic needs of food security, shelter, and providing ongoing opportunities for productive economies. We have 3 main programs at NUSANED. The Roofs That Shield is our shelter program, The crops that yield is our food security and agribusiness program. And the goods in need is this continuous program that provides various goods for vulnerable communities. Come the Beirut emergency, the Beirut blast, we created the Beirut emergency response literally on the morning after the blast. I will focus today on our Roofs That Shield program, which is our shelter program, and where we created post-blast the sub-program called the Roofs That Shield Beirut, the counterpart of which is the Roofs That Shield Akkar program, an ongoing program, shelter program, which we initiated almost a year ago in the north of Lebanon. With a target to rehabilitate 2,050 residential and commercial units in Beirut, we established our shelter hotline just a week after the blast. And our impact actually is due mainly to our mobilizing a network of donors, partners, experts, and volunteers, of building team capacity exponentially by migrating private sector expertise to humanitarian work, and by capping the energy and capacity of the Lebanese youth, which has been truly a wonder to see and capture. In a nutshell, this is what the shelter hotline has allowed us to work from day one. We pride ourselves that we are of the local NGOs that was able to work all over Beirut, as shown in this dashboard, with a very inclusive approach to identifying needs and addressing them. And this is where we can see our three programs operating in parallel, based on digitized needs assessment, that not only started with through our hotline reaching out to the whole of Beirut, but then was also operating under the zone allocation system that both the Army as well as the UN Shelter Cluster had put in place, and we had coordinated with both of them to be allocated several zones in Beirut to work in. So this digitized assessment actually helped us launch, based on GIS, all our work, our data management and communication. To date, we have assessed about 2,200 units. We've rehabilitated around 1,400 units, residential units. About 600 are under rehabilitation, and about 150 are to be rehabilitated. Around 25% of the work we do is SMEs. We rehabilitate SMEs because we strongly believe that, of course, as shelter being a primary human right, but it's also the livelihoods through the rehabilitation of SMEs that we can help Lebanese communities get back to somehow of an economic cycle that they are very much in need of, and to migrate away from being an NGO as an aid provider, and rather try to help build sustainable systems for these Lebanese communities to thrive. This information or this data is is communicated also on our application, where we not only communicate our progress and our programs, but also it's a very transparent means of communicating donors, where donors have access to see the progress of the work they've donated towards, to actually select what program they want to contribute to, and to almost dynamically and transparently partake in the progress that we do. This is a selection of the before and after pictures of both SMEs and residential units in Beirut. And this is all thanks to a whole sort of network of partners who have entrusted in us in this very short period, who have donated, who have supported us. And this is actually has been our strong grounding, from funding platforms to corporate donors, to collaborators, institutions, local NGOs. We pride ourselves that we've built a network of collaboration with local NGOs, which is a little bit of a new culture in Lebanon, which had to come through given the informal and bilateral coordination that we had to contribute to and even lead in locally to actually get things done and done quickly. And this agility helped us address different sectors, rehabilitate different sectors, whether they're the hospitality sectors, supporting the syndicate of restaurant owners in Jemaiza and Maram Khail and rehabilitating a bouquet of restaurants and pubs. We supported also through our donations different hospitals and also schools, institutions. And this has really been cultural entities, and this has really helped us not only be to contribute directly to the rehabilitation, but also to channel donations we got from suppliers and donors towards the rehabilitation of different institutions and spaces in Beirut. And this has only been successful with partnerships and collaborators that we've worked with. One of our contributions also, one of our main contributions is also contributing to historic restoration. And our sort of focus project is the Salim Ghulam cluster buildings, which is made out of 2 buildings in Ermail. This was the condition after the blast. There are plot 1137 and 474 in Ermail. The conditions before the blast, like a lot of the heritage in Beirut, obviously was in much need of intervention, not only in terms of structural intervention and sort of scaffolding to keep them in place, to cover them before the winter period, but it was really to also mobilize to get the funds and to get the level of expertise that was much needed to mobilize a team of experts to intervene on heritage. And this cluster of buildings is also adjacent to a public stair. Our team of experts and collaborators and partners and donors to come together and provide sort of the highest level of expertise, not only in terms of contracting, of materiality, of specifications, but also to capture the restoration that captures the material culture and urban narrative in Beirut. And really, the Salim Ghulam Heritage Cluster is one of the many buildings that deserves restoration, but in particular, like others, it reflects also the story of Beirut. It reflects the story of architecture between the 1870s and 1830s. It narrates the story of a family and the dynamic and intricate growth patterns that's reflected in architecture. And this we've captured actually not only in the restoration of this building, but also in its documentation. This is just showing you a little bit of the spirit of what we were handling. Again, migrating private sector expertise and experience for the past 2 decades as practitioners into historic preservation and project management and dealing with in-kind donations of all sorts. And these 2 buildings actually, in their documentation also told the story of the materiality of building in Beirut. The explosion, unfortunately, not only damaged such a vast area in Beirut, but it also revealed, ironically, a lot of the dynamics in the city, the underlying conditions that we all knew were there, but were only exposed because of the blast. And this was important to capture. It was important to intervene on buildings that were already in bad condition, not only to bring them back better, which is sort of the slogan of the shelter sector, but to bring them back better for the people and because of the people. And this was what we were very keen on. And it was a very participatory approach. So the owners and the family owners were very much involved in every decision because it was actually their house we were restoring. And we really had to bring them back in. It was more of a psychological participatory approach also because they were the ones who were devastated. They were the ones who were immediately moved by this explosion. And it was our duty and obligation, not only as professionals, but also as a humanitarian NGO, to actually support them at multi-levels. Needless to say, the high standards and expertise was mobilized for this project. And the documentation team, as I was saying, not only documents the process by which the buildings are being built, but also thanks to the EUB Neighborhood Initiative, we mobilized a team to actually document the history, the growth and evolution of the buildings that hopefully will produce an exhibition and a book at a later stage. And this was really our contribution to capture the story of one cluster, historic cluster in Beirut. And so piece by piece, literally, we are dismantling and putting together these two buildings to give hope. And this is where I'd like to end, because in every SME we capture a story, a human story, and it's not the buildings or the stones that we are capturing, it's actually the people that we want to keep where they are and actually help them thrive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rana, for that presentation. Next, we're going to open it up to Bebw'shebbek, with Mariana Wehbe introducing the initiative. Bebw'shebbek is one of the organizations that came about as an immediate response to the blast. It's a grassroots initiative in urban resurrection, and they're rebuilding doors and windows in the city, but also I would like to add they're giving a role to a lot of youth who need a place to channel their energy in a very literally constructive way. So with that, I'm going to leave it to Mariana.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for having me on this panel. I feel honored. I have absolutely no experience in architecture or design, but it's truly an honor to be here. My name is Mariana Wehbe. I have a PR company that is the strategic consultants for businesses in luxury, design, and art. And after the explosion, I found myself as the co-founder of Bebw'shebbek, which is an initiative that is doing something very specific. It's an initiative to just build doors and windows for the families that were affected by the blast and to get them back home as soon as possible. Our work was not structural, and we do not have the experience other NGOs have. So we became kind of the joker, and we became kind of that NGO that was filling the gaps for families to have a hotline to call who just needed doors and windows to get back home. I'm going to share with you a small video and then a presentation of the work that's been done by these tremendous volunteers who are actually with me here today, and we'll take it from there.
من عين الزمن سيفنا والقلم سهلنا والجبل منبت للرجال ثورنا والعمل من سبيل الكرم كلنا للوطن للعلا للعالم كلنا للوطن.
Bebw'shebbek is an initiative that started after August 4th, after the blast destroyed our city. It started because I was affected, my partner and co-founder was affected, and the first thing we could think about was, what do we need to do? It wasn't a matter of what happened to us or why is this happening to us. It was just an automatic, what do we need to do? We knew that we needed an army on the ground. I mean, we were going to get the funding and we had the know-how. I have 16 years of supply chain management. My partner has a collectible design gallery and she's excellent in procurement. So I knew what the setup was going to be like, but I also knew that we needed an army, and the army had to be skilled. So I only asked for volunteers who are either engineers, architects, interior designers, interior architects, civil engineers to be the volunteers. And this was when everything shifted. What's also amazing is how these young men and women are now discovering their city. They're discovering the architecture of it, the 1920s buildings, 30s, 40s, 50s. They're understanding the ceilings and how they were built, the kind of wood, the cedar wood that lasts generations, the difference in quality, and how these homes lasted so long, how they were built, what type of architecture. And that is something I think, is a blessing in a way. Getting to live it and see it and be part of it. And I think one day when our city is rebuilt, they will say we were part of this. We were the young architects and civil engineers and interior designers who helped rebuild our city. And they will be telling everybody about the architecture and what year this building is and what year that building is, and appreciate it. Really, really appreciate it and love it from all their hearts.
What do we start with every morning, guys?
We were doing this for our city, for our country. And so I wanted to remind the team every day, the volunteers, to sing the national anthem. It became mandatory. It was also a way for us to keep their dignity, to let them know that this was a duty, but we also have a duty towards our city and our patriotism, and to standing together and to unifying under one cause, which is Lebanon.
My video is not as technical, and the reason for that is this initiative was also a healing process, and I am sure many of the NGOs that have done phenomenal work understand what I'm talking about, because the healing process came from us working together. And then all of a sudden, this youth came out, this incredible, talented, smart youth that was ready to work, and not because it was volunteering, because it was time to rebuild. The rebuilding of Bebw'shebbek was not just the doors and windows. We to Rana and Sandra, I also believe that the blast that we've lived, we were living in this pot, and the pot just blew up, right? And just put everything into perspective and put everybody in their place. I also believe that a lot of the egos were put aside, and it was very focused that we need to work together. This was a duty. This was no longer about you are an NGO and I'm not, and how long you've been there and who's raising funds. And that's one of the reasons when we did get funding, and let's say Let's Play approached us and we knew we had like local dollars we could not use, whatever. I was like, I'm in. Well, you need the funding, you got it. You're doing schools, that's not my place, you go right ahead. And it was, the more we did it, the more we spoke to each other, the more we collaborated, and the more it became a thing to do as well. I remember calling Rana once. I didn't know her as well, and we had a house, and I was like, what do I do? This is structural. And she's like, we're on it. Great. Team, get off it. We also had to, we're not an NGO. We didn't know who's doing what. We just wanted to help on the ground. So we also needed to make sure we were not duplicating the work. A lot of phone calls were going back and forth between all of us. And that was without us saying, it just started to get organized and very well structured. And I hope moving forward, we will continue to be in this mindset, because it is extremely powerful.
Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to a question on something you just touched on from Tracy Basile, which is, how was the duplication of AIDS issue tackled? How was the communication, if any, between the many different NGOs and initiatives carried out? So I think we've kind of touched upon that, but it would be good to go deeper into how we are avoiding the duplication of effort, I guess. Mariana, Nada, Rana, sorry.
I think at the beginning, at the time of the blast, we all mobilized instinctively, and I think the duplication that happened in August and September was nothing that could be avoided, frankly. And soon we all realized that it's only going to happen, this coordination on the ground had to happen between efforts that Mariana's talking about, initiative to NGO to partner to donor. And I think this is where we started establishing these networks and communication channels. And I think this was super important. So duplication, although did happen and is still happening, but the duplication is, and this is why we as NUSANED try to focus on what we do best and what we know and to fill in that gap. And this is why our network of partners grew, because again, if Let's Play are doing school renovations, then let's support them succeed in that. If we got a donation of medical equipment or medicines, we give it to our partners, Médecins Sans Frontières, to handle that. So basically, we realized early on that it was important to stick to what we do best and let others do what they do best. Because there were many fantastic initiatives happening. And this is how we, and I'm sure a lot of others tackled it.
Thank you for that. A question directed at Let's Play from Leia Fakhouri. Do you believe that by creating these urban platforms through playgrounds, that they are a form of rebellion against other forms of weaponized architecture? For Sandra, Nada, or Etienne.
Okay, so I guess they stayed quiet. I'm taking this. I mean, we're practicing architects. We are realistic, but we believe that that playgrounds are somehow the first public spaces we experience each other in, and we learn to communally play together and have fun together, but also how to negotiate space together. So for us, it doesn't work on its own. Of course, that would be magical, but it is a small seed in between many other initiatives that need to happen to work on other violent issues and so on.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Leia, if you'd like to respond in the chat, we can continue that conversation. And for now, I'm gonna pick up another question that'll be interesting to get the perspective of Mariana and Rana as an initiative born as a response and one that was already existent. What is the role of this collective or network of initiatives that's formed in the post-urgency stage that we're entering? I guess post-urgency on a physical level, not a national level, but still. Either of you can, yeah.
We still have a lot to do. For me personally, my job is in PR and luxury. My job is not an NGO. I just did what I had to do at the time. What I found and I know I've had a few questions because I said that, yes, we are an initiative and yes, it will end. Okay, but that does not mean that the work that has been done will end. Why? First of all, being connected with all these young volunteers, interior designers and architects, we have an army. And these guys are going to be part of something that I am going to be working on personally to make sure that they find jobs, that they get into the right places. You know, other than the fact that we're meeting the young men and women, we also met families. It's the same thing with the NGOs. We met families we would have never met, we would have never spoken to, we would have never had a connection with, coming from where we work and living in the bubble that we were living in. So that changed our spectrum and that started a conversation. My job is to make sure that I use all of my resources in my world, in the world of art and design and PR and luxury, to make sure that they find jobs, to make sure that my creative community is being used, to make sure that I put Lebanon on a platform, whether it's a tech platform, whether it's linking people to export businesses, to export creatives, to bring in that kind of work. This is what my post work will do, take me back to what I know how to do, but still it will always, no matter what, be about Lebanon and the creatives in my country from our side. So it won't be doors and windows, but it will be something different.
Thank you, Mariana. Rana?
Yeah, from our end, I mean, of course, it was a crisis. It was an emergency state. And I think this is where we as an NGO and many NGOs have been sort of handed the task, but also the burden of carrying through from an emergency crisis to sort of a post-crisis situation. And as a humanitarian NGO, again, our tasks are limited, our scope should be limited, so we hand over post-crisis to an infrastructure that can not only govern, but can also envision the reconstruction of Beirut. So we're in no position as an NGO to continue this post-crisis interventions. And this is while having conversations with academics and having the symposium you have today. Really, it's for all of us to come together and think about how to think longer term and not remain, as we do in Lebanon, continuously in a crisis mode and trying to put off fires here and there. And this is why essentially NUSANED was created, to migrate away from being an aid provider, but rather to try to build sustainable systems. And we want to go back to our food security issues and to creating jobs in agribusiness. We want to go back to shelter. And what the Beirut blast exposed was the vulnerabilities of our community in the heart of Beirut, in the heart of the capital. When you see the shelter standards in Jaitawi and Fassouh and Ashrafiyya and Burj Hamoud and Dermail, you wonder how this was sort of, all these underlying conditions were there dormant, and we had this opportunity to help so many. So this is really it's fantastic. We will continue. We have so much to do. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Thank you so much. A question from Riyad. Sabeel mentioned in the first session, on the topic of Republic of NGOs. I see many of the NGOs and initiatives are working on the ground that the governing institutions would usually be working in. In a way, they have replaced the failed state in compensating for a lack of action. Do those initiatives see a future in government, or would they rather forever compensate?
I think this is a rhetoric question, Riyad, and I'll answer you briefly and remain non-political about my answer. I think there was no intention on NGOs to actually, it was almost a no-brainer for us to take action. Not as a political statement, but as an urgency. And ideally, the NGOs can only contribute and participate so much in the reconstruction of a city. I come from a generation where reconstruction happened in the 90s, and I was part of those efforts, those professionals working in that era. And here we see ourselves again. So as NGOs, there's so much you can do to the public sector, but at some point there needs to be a collaboration and there needs to be a support. As NGOs, we were not only on the ground, we were agile, and we had the expertise, we had the drive, we had the youth on board, but we also had the donors on board, which was for us fantastic, but it also put us in a position to become fund managers of all the money that was filtered into Beirut. Mainly was filtered through NGOs and initiatives. And this was sort of, if we didn't have the capacity to handle that and to pass it on to the beneficiaries, whether it was funds or in-kind donations or whatnot, it was really a huge channel and a huge operation in a very short period of time. So we look forward, actually, for proper governance. We look forward to hand over and to collaborate, to take it much further, and it needs to, because there's only a limit to where we can, as NGOs and initiatives, reach.
But I think that, many of the governing forces or parties, as was shown in the previous session, are actually also trying to win, approval by supplying, aid and money, And I think that I would much more trust the NGOs and the initiatives that have been, emerging lately in governing the country, much more than those parties that have been there for a longer time. And I think that as long as your agenda is for the good, I don't see why not start this program and actually, use the audience that you have to create a party and participate in the elections, to actually as long as your agenda is for the good, and this is what I've seen so far. No, I think the political force that you're gaining. It's me urging. No, I think that the all the good that you're doing in all of those initiatives that we just saw, I think there should be a way in which, by as you said, trying to make those initiatives more sustainable, there should be a way in which to make sure that those things do not repeat. Like as you said, you were here in the Civil War, and now there's another phase of reconstruction. So how can we actually slowly, by doing good, slowly replace this failed state, just as we already are? But how can we formalize this kind of informal ways that you are already replacing the state?
Can I just add something? I mean, for me, the issue of just a general comment. I think it's very important for us to say we are not apolitical, and I think NGOs have to somehow present themselves as apolitical, and nothing in the city is apolitical. Our work is not apolitical. We want to generate leaders, and we want to find activists, and we want to be political. And this is how we're going to transform the system, and it'll probably take us forever, but it should happen.
I agree with you, Sandra. I'm about to say something that might get me in trouble, but I always used to say it internally, and I'm going to say it anyways, since our work is almost done, so nobody can fire us, but no. The amount of data that the NGOs have in Beirut is huge. And I would love to see this being used for the good, for educating, for upcoming elections, for using our armies on the ground to connect with these families, to go door to door, to talk about elections, to educate, to make sure people elect the right people while we find the right leaders that need to take over. So yes, Riyad, you're absolutely right. First of all, we did not ask for this, especially the initiative. We did not ask for this responsibility with the money. It's a huge responsibility. If we didn't have Unite Lebanon Youth Project, which is a hugely compliant and transparent NGO that took us under their wing, we wouldn't have been able to handle it. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. We didn't ask for responsibility, and we did not, but we took on the duty. And should we want to dream of a better future, it's right here. It's in all of these young men and women and us and our generation. And we do have the power, we do have the knowledge, we do have the data, and we do have the trust. It's a matter of, like Sandra said, making that decision. If nothing is going to change, maybe we're not apolitical. We are political. We have to make a change on the ground. But I hope that won't get me in trouble, but that's truly how I feel. And that I would be ready to come back and work on. So I'm not going to say NUSANED, but I love you guys. And any other NGO that's ready to work on that for elections, I am ready to work on that and get an army on the ground.
Thank you, Mariana, for that, and for both input from Let's Play and Rana, and Riyad for instigating this discussion. I think that was a really important thing to bring up, this aspect of not being able to be apolitical within the climate of Beirut, whether we like it or not, which is unfortunate but necessary, I feel, in all the roles you guys are playing within the city and within the country. On that note, there's a question or statement from Petro Haj, which mentions that through all the work that you've done, you've collected a huge amount of information and insight about the city, be it through your surveys or through engaging with people on the ground. Is it important for you to publish and convey your findings, not only about the city itself, but also about the process of working together within it? It would be great to see a roadmap to collaboration in Beirut, not only to respond to crises, but on how to respond to community needs in general. Floor is open.
I think that's a wonderful statement, and I think very valid. Before I comment on it, I just want to differentiate between what is apolitical and non-political. I don't think any of us as Lebanese is apolitical. We all have a stand and almost a duty that is inherent, but we do have to remain at equal distance because we are at the end as an NGO, we are on a humanitarian mission, and I think this is where the nuances. So it's not that we do not want change, we are actually instilling this change, we are empowering the people, and this is our channel to actually bring about change. Putting that aside, I think definitely the long-term vision and the long-term need is definitely to build community, to build it on participatory approaches, to build it on a bottoms-up approach. And I think this is really where the work of the NGO sector and so many initiatives needs to go beyond crisis management and more work on preventive measures that are within our reach, not those that are not within our reach, but really to build infrastructure, social infrastructure, economic infrastructure within the situation and the context of Lebanon is very, very much needed.
Thank you. A question that I think could be answered by Sandra, Nada, or Etienne, but also open for other responses. When the city is rebuilt, how do we re-energize it? And I think this is an interesting question, both on the level, of course, we need to re-energize it by bringing life back to the citizens of Beirut through empowering them through financial aid, humanitarian aid, and so on. But also in terms of these spaces and the trauma or the memory that now lives in them, how do we restore the life that once existed there? Or are we starting almost from scratch? Floor is yours. Let's play.
Yeah, I believe it's a big responsibility to say that we'll be able to do that, at least for us as architects and maybe urban planners, but at least what we can do or what we're trying to do is to create possibilities. So the way we're seeing it is that public spaces are not there, or maybe they are there, but not really accessible. Playgrounds, school playgrounds were our only option, and we saw it as the first public space a kid would be able to experience, maybe meet new other kids, start to interact with others and build friendships and meet new people. So we feel that this can be a good potential. And the way we're designing is also about experimentation. It's not about setting a very specific way of playing or of creating a toy and this is how you deal with it. So we believe that starting with kids is the best option we can have, and giving them these possibilities, we believe that they will be able to take over eventually. So it's a long process. And it's more about doing some strategic intervention rather than believing that we can do the huge change ourselves.
Thank you, Nada. I have a question for Alex. I'm very interested in photography, but more in how you're using your images post-explosion. Do you see them as something essential as part of the archive of what happened post-blast? We saw how after the Civil War, a lot of the memory of what happened or the reality of what occurred was lost due to a lack of imagery or a lack of documentation. How do you feel like the images that you've taken can be used moving forward? Or what are they to you in the scope of this? Alex, are you with us? I think you might be on mute.
As an architect, like many other architects, I'm interested in photography, and I felt when the explosion happened, I felt I just had to go there with my camera, and I felt it is really important to make a record of this, momentous, horrible event. I mean, I think it's and for safeguarding and for safekeeping, for referencing, in the years to come. I lived in the Lebanon during the war, and I'm grateful that, there were photographers out there sort of taking photos, but not too much. So I think the recording of such incidences are very important. As for what I've done with the photos, at the moment I've sort of self-published them in a book. They've been given to my uncle, who's with those images is trying to bring awareness. So I mean, I think photography is a fantastic tool. It's a very powerful tool of bringing awareness, beyond Lebanon, particularly with the various sort of communications available to us now. So I think everyone should be recording and somehow distributing that footage. I think it's very important.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for a brilliant presentation as well. It was great to see those images.
Thank you very much, Judi.
I'm gonna take a final question from Noor Farhat, which I think digs deeper into the topic we were discussing about this aspect of politics and how we engage or try to detach to some level. She says, in an NGO where the state does its responsibility, NGOs can remain non-political. But in a state where you had the largest non-nuclear explosion in human history, economic collapse, a pandemic, and some 90% of the country below the poverty line, how can you remain distant from politics?
This is one of our volunteers, so I'm not going to answer. I'm going to let somebody else answer. But it's definitely a valid question.
I'll answer to this one. Thanks for the question. I think the fact that we are somehow engaged with the people, it is a political decision. We've decided to be with the people and to actually do something about it, and not actually just stand there and actually not be present somehow in the acts that are happening somehow in the city. So we have a political decision and we've made it, and it's actually to do something about it and to stand with the people and to be part of the process of the reconstruction. And I think that by itself is a political decision, and not actually questioning whether we are political or not, but just doing something about it. And that's it.
Thank you, Etienne. I think that was a very valid point, that in reality, every action within a nation is political, whether intentional or unintentional, every action is political. And I think that's what Rana was touching upon, the idea of apolitical or non-political, and trying to remain humanitarian and objective while operating in a very not rich, but very active political climate, a very crucial time. So thank you, Noor, for the question, and thank you, Etienne. I will take one last question because it came during that, from Ziad Mutran. How can we export the Beirut experience to the world? Beirut has always been like a laboratory of events and happenings that should send a message to the entire world. Can the world be a big playground after all? Open to any of the panelists for a response. Maybe Etienne, maybe Alex.
Ziad, I'm assuming Ziad is actually a collaborator with us. So I don't know if actually we should reply to the question or leave the floor to someone else for the reply. So.
Okay. Yalla, Etienne. I feel the question is
yes, okay, it's addressed to us somehow, so we have to answer it. Okay, we'll answer it. So, yes, we would love, this experience to actually grow. I think it started with us, to be quite specific about it, we started with 3 small playgrounds, and it would have been a dream for us to do 3 playgrounds. Then the support we got from all these NGOs, from everyone that was around us, that believed in the idea and actually started to develop this project. We're doing our 7th playground today. We have a network of possibilities to do even more. Yes, we do consider Beirut to be our main playground currently, but definitely if we are to say that the world is a big playground, there's so many opportunities of actually working, whether it is, we started with schools, but it can be public spaces, it can be green spaces. It's open for interpretation in so many different ways. And I think the opportunity that once it's started is what interested everyone, I think. And that's what interests us and motivates us to continue. So.
what I'd like to just touch on here is a sense of scale, if I may, because yes, Beirut is our playground and the world is too, as Etienne is saying. But I think also it's important to highlight that the Beirut explosion was a catalyst that has brought so much attention, and rightly so, to Beirut. But there are so many needs across Lebanon that while we maintain our commitment elsewhere in the rural areas, there's so much need for more playgrounds in rural areas, in suburbs, in the north and the south, and the Beqa. So there are so many needs that while Beirut, of course, is absorbing all this attention, I think it's very important to remain. Because when we want to build Beirut as a capital, I think there is a national obligation that we are all contributing to that is beyond Beirut. I think this is very, very important, because to build a nation, going back to the politics and remaining apolitical, to build a nation, we have to empower the whole of the Lebanon, and not only the urban center, which, as damaged as it was and as much as we are supporting all the way, I think we have to diversify our attention too.
Thank you, Etienne. Thank you, Rana. I'd like to wrap up this round of the panel and extend a huge thank you to all the speakers. You are truly the army behind rebuilding Lebanon. And actually, in opposition to the moment of silence, I'd like to invite everyone to take themselves off mute and give a round of applause to the speakers today and their teams that are behind the scenes that have done all the brilliant work that we're actually discussing. So thank you, guys. Okay, we're gonna have a brief.
The claps are never good on this thing. No?
Yeah, but we tried.
Yeah, we try. Thank you so much for coming, all of you, and participating in this symposium. Very nice to see all the work you've done. Alex's presentation was especially heartbreaking, but it's nice to see a kind of emerging hope coming from all the NGOs, and and nice to speak politics with you. So I guess, and also I want to say that organizing this, I saw that there are many people that I knew, and many people that the people I knew, many people who are students of other participants, and people who are, the teachers of the teachers. And I think what's nice about, being Lebanese is that whenever you meet someone, they tell you, oh, I know a Lebanese person, maybe you know them. No? And so this feel of community, and most of the time you do. So in this kind of feel of community is very, very strong, and now stronger than ever. And it's nice to see also some more playful initiatives like Let's Play, thinking maybe more to the future. So so I want to thank you very much. And we're going to have a lunch break. And then we'll be back at 2, so in an hour and 10 minutes with this next panel, which will talk more about the thinking behind architecture, the role of memory in reconstruction, and maybe the role of where hopeful architecture exists, maybe a more philosophical conversation. All right, thank you, everyone, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Riyad, thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Judi, for doing a great job at chairing this session.
Thank you. I also forgot that people are not allowed to unmute with our current Zoom setting for this panel, so your applause was much louder, but unfortunately. But thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks.